Jimin said, "We can't go on like this." And Jungkook replied with a hug too tight, as if it were the only way to beg. When Jimin whispers they can't go on, Jungkook's desperate embrace ignites love, secrets, and a choice that could shatter them. "We can't go on like this," Jimin said, his voice breaking as thunder split the night in half, and Jungkook replied with a hug too tight, as if it were the only way to beg. Rain lashed against the rooftop, soaking through cotton and skin, turning the city into a blur of silver and shadow beneath them. Jungkook's fingers dug into the fabric of Jimin's jacket, clutching him as though the world itself were trying to tear them apart. Jimin could feel Jungkook's heartbeat, wild, frantic, terrified, hammering against his own chest. For a moment, neither of them breathed. The rooftop door slammed open behind them, the echo swallowed by the storm, but neither turned around. The real storm had already been building for months. Jimin pulled back first. His hair clung to his forehead, eyes glistening with something more painful than tears. "We are suffocating," he whispered. "Don't you feel it?" Jungkook did feel it. He felt it in the way their laughter had grown cautious, in the way every glance lingered too long when others were around, in the way silence had become heavier than words. He felt it in the rumors that stalked them online, in the cameras that never seemed to blink, in the expectations that wrapped around their throats like invisible wires. But feeling it and accepting it were two different things. "I can breathe," Jungkook said hoarsely, "as long as you're here." Jimin's jaw tightened. That was Jungkook's gift, and his flaw. His devotion burned so brightly it could blind him. He loved without moderation, without contingency plans. Jimin loved too, but his love carried fear inside it like a hidden fracture. Fear of ruining everything. Fear of being the reason Jungkook lost what he had worked his whole life to build. Below them, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the war unfolding above. They had not meant for it to happen. Late-night practices had turned into longer conversations. Shared exhaustion had turned into shared confessions. Jungkook had always been physically affectionate, clinging and playful, but somewhere along the way his touches had changed, lingering at Jimin's waist, tracing absent-minded circles against his wrist, seeking reassurance in the curve of his shoulder. Jimin had noticed. Jimin had not stopped him. The first time they crossed the line, it had not felt like a mistake. It had felt inevitable. A quiet dressing room, a trembling breath, Jungkook's hand cupping Jimin's face as though holding something fragile and sacred. They had both known, in that suspended second before their lips met, that nothing would ever be simple again. Now simplicity felt like a myth. "I'm tired of hiding," Jimin admitted, his voice almost lost in the wind. "Tired of pretending I don't look for you in every room. Tired of acting like this doesn't," he gestured helplessly between them, "matter." Jungkook's eyes softened, then hardened with resolve. "Then don't pretend." "It's not that easy." It never was. There were contracts, careers, fans who loved them in ways that felt both beautiful and suffocating. There were people who would misunderstand, twist, condemn. Jimin had grown up learning to read the room, to calculate risks. Jungkook had grown up chasing what he wanted with fearless intensity. That difference now stood between them like a wall. The rooftop door creaked again, and this time footsteps approached. Their manager's voice echoed faintly, calling their names. The world was coming back to claim them. Jimin stepped away fully now, and the loss of warmth was immediate, brutal. Jungkook's hands hovered in the empty space where Jimin had been, as if unsure what to do without him. "We can't keep choosing each other in secret," Jimin said. "It's tearing me apart." Jungkook swallowed. "So what are you saying?" Jimin closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he saw everything they had been: shared headphones on long flights, whispered jokes under blankets, arguments that ended in desperate apologies. He saw the way Jungkook looked at him when he thought no one else noticed, like he was both anchor and horizon. "I'm saying we choose each other properly," Jimin said at last, opening his eyes, "or we stop." The manager's footsteps were closer now. Time had shrunk to seconds. Jungkook stepped forward again, but this time his embrace was different, not desperate, not clinging. He wrapped his arms around Jimin with steady certainty, resting his forehead against his. "I don't want to stop," he said. I want to be brave. Jimin let out a shaky laugh. You're always brave. No, Jungkook murmured. I'm only brave when it comes to you. The confession hung between them, fragile and incandescent. They separated just as the rooftop door swung open. Their manager froze at the sight of them standing so close, eyes red, clothes drenched. Questions flickered across his face. Jimin straightened first, composure sliding back into place like armor. Jungkook followed, though his gaze never strayed far from Jimin. We needed air, Jimin said calmly. The manager studied them, suspicion lingering, but the storm demanded retreat. We are leaving, now. As they descended the stairs, water dripping from their sleeves, Jungkook's hand brushed against Jimin's. This time, Jimin didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined briefly, hidden in the darkness of the stairwell. The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. They fought more openly, about fear, about timing, about what they were willing to risk. There were nights when Jimin's anxiety clawed at him, whispering that love was selfish. There were nights when Jungkook's frustration boiled over, accusing Jimin of choosing safety over happiness. But there were also mornings when they woke up tangled together, sunlight spilling across sheets, and the world outside felt distant and manageable. They began setting boundaries, carving out spaces that belonged only to them. They spoke honestly about consequences instead of pretending they didn't exist. They allowed themselves to imagine a future not dictated by fear. Jimin started writing again, pouring his turmoil into melodies that trembled with vulnerability. Jungkook listened to every draft, offering feedback with the seriousness of someone entrusted with treasure. In return, Jungkook confessed his own insecurities, the pressure to be perfect, the terror of disappointing everyone. Jimin held those fears gently, the way Jungkook had once held his face in that dressing room. Their love matured, shedding some of its recklessness without losing its intensity. One evening, months after the storm, they returned to the rooftop. The sky was clear this time, the city glowing beneath a calm sea of stars. No thunder, no shouting wind. Jimin leaned against the railing, inhaling the cool air. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Jungkook joined him shoulder to shoulder. Loving you, he shook his head. Never. Jimin studied the skyline, then looked at Jungkook fully. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. It's still going to be hard. I know. We might lose things. Jungkook's hand found his again, fingers lacing together with quiet confidence. Then we'll lose them together. Jimin felt the truth of that settle deep in his chest. The suffocation he had once feared had transformed into something else, not a cage, but a shared breath. They were no longer clinging to each other out of desperation. They were standing side by choice. We can go on like this, Jimin said softly, a faint smile touching his lips. Jungkook squeezed his hand, not too tight this time, just enough to remind him that he was there. And under the vast, indifferent sky, with the city humming below and the future uncertain but shared, they chose each other, openly in their hearts, bravely in their steps, and without the need to beg. The silence shattered not with thunder this time, but with a headline. Jimin stared at the glowing phone screen, his pulse roaring in his ears as if he were back on that rooftop in the storm. The article had already been shared thousands of times, the comments multiplying by the second. A blurry photo of him and Jungkook in the stairwell, fingers intertwined, faces too close to be dismissed as coincidence. The caption was a question mark wrapped in gasoline. Across the room, Jungkook paced like a caged animal. Who took it? He demanded, running a hand through his hair. Who was even there? It doesn't matter who, Jimin replied quietly. His voice was too calm. That was when Jungkook knew he was scared. It matters to me, Jungkook snapped. They've been following us, watching us. That's not okay. No, it's not. Jimin locked his phone and placed it face down on the table as though that could silence the world. But it happened, and now we deal with it. Their dorm felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing inward with every notification buzz. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the windows, a mocking echo of the night everything had changed. The company had already called twice. An emergency meeting was scheduled in an hour. Jungkook stopped packing and looked at Jimin, really looked at him. Are you okay? Jimin let out a brittle laugh. Do I look okay? You look like you're about to disappear. That struck too close. Jimin folded his arms, hugging himself. This is what I was afraid of. Jungkook's jaw tightened. So what? We panic. We deny everything, pretend it's fake. And what do you suggest? Jimin shot back, sharper than intended. We hold a press conference and confirm it. Watch everything we've built go up in flames. Jungkook stepped closer, heat radiating off him. You think loving you is a flame I'm afraid of. Don't, Jimin warned, eyes flashing. Don't turn this into some noble sacrifice. I'm not, Jungkook's voice cracked. I'm saying I don't regret it. That's not the point. Their voices collided, bouncing off the walls. The tension between them felt volatile, like one wrong word could detonate something irreversible. Jimin ran a hand over his face. He struggled for words. I just wanted time to figure out how to protect you. Protect me, Jungkook's expression darkened. From what? Myself. From the backlash, from the hate, from losing opportunities because of me. Jungkook laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really think I'm that fragile? I think you're human, Jimin shouted, the restraint finally breaking. And humans get hurt. Silence fell heavy between them. Jungkook's breathing slowed, but his eyes burned. You don't get to decide what I can handle. The words landed like a slap. A knock at the door made them both flinch. Their manager entered without waiting, face pale, phone pressed to his ear. He gestured sharply for them to get ready. The car is downstairs, now. The ride to the company building was suffocating. Neither of them spoke. The city lights blurred past the window, indifferent to the storm brewing inside the vehicle. In the conference room, executives sat stiffly, expressions carved from stone. The photo was projected onto a screen at the front, enlarged, impossible to ignore. We need to respond immediately, one executive said, fingers steepled. Rumors spread faster than truth. It's just a photo, Jungkook said before Jimin could stop him. It's not just a photo, another voice replied coolly. It's speculation, narrative, brand risk. Brand risk. The phrase made Jimin's stomach twist. What are you suggesting? He asked carefully. A statement denying any romantic involvement. Emphasize brotherhood, misinterpretation, maintain the image. The words felt rehearsed. Jungkook leaned forward, and if we do? A pause, heavy, calculated. Then we prepare for consequences, the first executive answered. Endorsements may withdraw, public opinion may shift, there will be backlash. Jimin felt Jungkook's knee brush against his under the table. A silent question, a silent plea. Give us a minute, Jimin said, surprising even himself. The room emptied reluctantly, leaving them alone with the glaring image on the screen. For a long moment, neither spoke. They're not wrong, Jimin whispered finally. There will be consequences. Jungkook stood and walked toward the screen, staring at the frozen moment of their hands intertwined. That looks real, he murmured. Because it is. Jungkook turned to face him. Do you want to deny it? Jimin hesitated. He thought about the years of training, the sacrifices, the fans who felt like family, the fragile ecosystem of fame where one misstep could rewrite everything. Then he thought about the rooftop, the promise in Jungkook's voice, the way his embrace had shifted from desperate to steady. No, Jimin said. The word felt like stepping off a cliff. Jungkook's eyes widened, a flicker of shock giving way to something fierce and luminous. You mean that? I'm tired of suffocating, Jimin admitted. If we deny it, we go back to hiding, back to pretending. I can't do that again. Jungkook crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Jimin's hands. Say it again. I don't want to deny us. Emotions surged across Jungkook's face, relief, fear, love, all tangled together. He pulled Jimin into a hug, not crushing this time, but grounding. Whatever happens, he murmured into Jimin's hair, we face it. When the executives returned, the air felt different, charged. "We won't deny it," Jungkook said plainly. The reaction was immediate: shock, disbelief, arguments erupted, voices overlapping. "You're making an emotional decision. You don't understand the market impact. This isn't just about you." Jimin stood, heart pounding but voice steady. "It is about us, and we understand the risks." One executive exhaled sharply. "This could change everything." "Maybe it needs to," Jungkook replied. The statement that followed was careful but honest. It didn't label, it didn't dramatize. It acknowledged closeness, affection, and the desire to live authentically. It asked for respect. When it was finally released, the world seemed to hold its breath. The first wave of reactions was chaos. Support poured in alongside criticism. Hashtags trended within minutes. Some fans declared unwavering loyalty. Others felt betrayed. News outlets dissected every word. Jimin sat on the dorm floor that night, back against the couch, scrolling through messages until the words blurred. Jungkook sat opposite him, knees touching. "Regret?" Jungkook asked softly. Jimin looked up. The fear was still there, coiled tight in his chest, but beneath it was something steadier. "No," he said. Jungkook reached across the space between them and intertwined their fingers deliberately, openly, even though no cameras were present. "Then neither do I." Outside, the noise of the world continued, opinions clashing, narratives forming. Some doors quietly closed, others unexpectedly opened. Conversations sparked that had long been avoided. The industry trembled, but it did not collapse. Weeks later, when they stepped onto a stage for the first time since the announcement, the roar of the crowd was deafening. Jimin's hands trembled slightly as the lights hit his face. Jungkook noticed and leaned close. "Still brave," he teased under his breath. Jimin glanced at him, a small, genuine smile breaking through. "Only when it comes to you." The music began, and with it, a new chapter, messier, louder, more uncertain than before. But as they moved in sync under the blazing lights, no longer hiding the glances or soft touches, the suffocation was gone. The world had not ended. It had simply changed. And so had they. The first bottle shattered against the pavement, just meters from where they stood. Jimin heard the crash before he understood it, the sharp explosion of glass scattering across concrete like a gunshot. The crowd outside the broadcasting station had swelled far beyond security's expectations. Some fans were crying, some were chanting their names in support. Others were shouting words that burned even from a distance. Jungkook instinctively grabbed Jimin's wrist and pulled him back as security tightened around them. "Stay behind me," Jungkook muttered, jaw clenched. "I'm not made of glass," Jimin shot back, but he didn't pull away. Another object flew, this time a crumpled banner. It hit the barricade and fell uselessly. The tension in the air felt electric, unstable. "This was a mistake," their manager hissed under his breath as they were ushered toward the entrance. The station didn't anticipate this level of reaction. Jungkook stopped walking. Security stumbled at the sudden halt. "Keep moving," one of them urged. "No," Jungkook said, voice low but firm. Jimin felt it immediately, that shift in him, the same tone he'd used in the conference room, the same quiet defiance. "What are you doing?" Jimin whispered urgently. "They're fighting because of us," Jungkook replied. "Some of them are getting hurt." "It's not your job to fix the world right now," Jimin snapped. "It's your job to get inside safely." Another shout rose above the chaos. "You betrayed us." The words cut through Jimin like ice. He flinched despite himself. Jungkook heard it too. His fingers tightened around Jimin's wrist. "We didn't betray anyone." "You can't argue with thousands of people at once," Jimin said sharply. "Please." For a split second, it looked like Jungkook might step toward the barricade anyway. Then he exhaled slowly and allowed security to move them forward. Inside, the lobby doors slammed shut behind them, muffling the noise but not the weight of it. Silence felt worse. Jimin pulled his wrist free. You can't just freeze like that out there. And you can't pretend it doesn't matter, Jungkook fired back. They were still in the middle of the lobby. Staff members pretended not to stare. It does matter, Jimin said, lowering his voice but not his intensity. It matters too much, that's the problem. Jungkook ran both hands through his hair, packing now. I knew there'd be backlash. I didn't think, he broke off. You didn't think they'd look at you like that, Jimin finished quietly. Jungkook met his eyes. The hurt there was raw, unfiltered. I've spent my whole life trying to be someone they're proud of. You still are. Not to everyone. Jimin stepped closer. You can't be everyone's version of perfect. That doesn't mean it doesn't sting. The vulnerability in his voice softened something in Jimin, but it also ignited his own buried frustration. Do you think it doesn't sting for me? Do you think I didn't read the comments calling me selfish, manipulative, saying I dragged you into this? Jungkook's head snapped up. Dragged me. Yes, Jimin's laugh was brittle. Apparently I'm the villain. That's ridiculous. Is it? Jimin's composure cracked. You're younger. They think I influenced you, that I corrupted you, that this is some phase I pulled you into. Jungkook stared at him as if the idea physically hurt. You think I don't have agency? I know you do, Jimin said fiercely, but narratives don't care about truth. Before Jungkook could respond, their manager approached, face grim. The station wants to cancel the live segment. It's a security risk. Jungkook stiffened. Cancel. It's escalating outside. Jimin looked at Jungkook carefully. He knew that look building in him. Stubborn, resolute, dangerous. We're not canceling, Jungkook said. Jungkook, the manager began. We said we'd show up, he continued. If we disappear now, what message does that send? That we prioritize safety, the manager replied tightly. Jimin stepped in before the argument could explode. What if we pre-record instead? Smaller crew, controlled environment. Jungkook turned to him. That's hiding. That's being smart. Their eyes locked, tension flaring hot and immediate. You always do this, Jungkook said, voice low. Do what? Retreat when it gets hard. Jimin recoiled as if struck. You think this is easy for me? I think you'd rather minimize the damage than stand in the fire. And you'd rather burn everything down to prove a point. The words hung between them, brutal and undeniable. Staff members shifted uncomfortably around them. The manager rubbed his temples. Decide now. Jimin's heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear himself think. He imagined stepping onto that stage live, knowing the crowd outside was divided, furious, unpredictable. He imagined Jungkook facing that hostility head-on, absorbing it like he always did, pretending it didn't wound him. He also imagined walking away and letting fear dictate their narrative. Jimin looked at Jungkook, really looked at him, not the idol, not the symbol, the man who had held him on a storm-soaked rooftop and chosen bravery. Live, Jimin said finally. The word surprised all of them. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. Are you sure? No, Jimin admitted, but I don't want fear making our decisions. The manager swore under his breath, but began issuing instructions. Minutes later, they stood backstage. The roar of the indoor audience was distant compared to the chaos outside, but it was still loud enough to make Jimin's pulse race. Jungkook reached for his hand. You don't have to be strong all the time, he murmured. Jimin squeezed back. Neither do you. The host's voice echoed through the studio, introducing them with careful neutrality. Applause erupted, loud, sustained, but layered with something uncertain. They walked onto the stage together. The lights were blinding, cameras hovered like mechanical insects. Jimin forced himself to breathe evenly. The interview began predictably, questions about their recent projects, their music, their future plans. Then it shifted. There's been a lot of conversation lately, the host said delicately, about your personal lives. The audience stirred. Jungkook leaned toward the microphone first. We expected that. Do you regret addressing it the way you did? The host pressed. Jimin felt the room tighten. Jungkook glanced at him briefly, then answered, no. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jimin took his turn. We understand not everyone will agree with us, but we believe honesty is better than living half-truths. Some fans feel hurt, the host continued. They say the image they supported has changed. Jungkook's expression softened, not defensive but earnest. We never wanted to hurt anyone, but we are human before we are images. A voice suddenly shouted from the audience, louder than the rest. Then why didn't you tell us sooner? Security moved, but Jungkook lifted a hand slightly, signaling them to wait. Because we were scared, he said into the microphone. The honesty stunned the room into silence. Jimin felt something shift beside him. Jungkook wasn't posturing, he wasn't deflecting, he was exposing something real. We were scared of losing you, Jungkook continued. Scared of this exact moment, but hiding started to hurt more than the fear. Jimin swallowed hard, emotion rising unexpectedly in his throat. The broadcast ended without disaster. No riots, no dramatic walkouts, just a complicated mixture of applause, tears, and unresolved tension. Back in the dressing room afterward, the adrenaline crashed. Jimin sank into a chair, hands trembling slightly. That was reckless. Jungkook laughed softly, collapsing onto the couch. You said live. I know. Silence settled, thick but not hostile. Are you angry at me? Jungkook asked after a moment. Jimin looked at him, really looked. Sometimes. For what? For making it look so easy to be brave. Jungkook's smile faded. It's not easy. No. No, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I wake up every day wondering if today's the day something collapses, if I made a selfish choice, if you'll wake up and realize it's too much. Jimin's chest tightened. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Watch me. The intensity in his voice made Jungkook's breath hitch. You think I don't have doubts? Jimin continued, standing now, packing. I overthink everything. I imagine worst-case scenarios like it's a hobby, but every time I picture walking away from you, it feels worse than any backlash. Jungkook stood too, closing the space between them. Then stop acting like you're preparing for an exit. I'm preparing for impact, Jimin corrected. Jungkook cupped his face suddenly, firm but not forceful, making Jimin meet his eyes. We're already in the impact. The truth of it stole Jimin's breath. Outside the dressing room, the world continued debating them. Sponsors hesitated. Other artists watched carefully. Comment sections burned and bloomed in equal measure. Inside that small room, it was just them. If this ruins us, Jimin whispered, voice trembling despite his effort to steady it, I need to know it was worth it. Jungkook didn't hesitate. It is. The certainty in his answer wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, leaning into Jungkook's touch. The noise outside hadn't disappeared. The controversy hadn't settled. If anything, it was just beginning to reshape the ground beneath their feet. But the suffocation was still gone. And even as the world argued about them, projected onto screens and dissected by strangers, they stood in the center of it together, angry, terrified, defiant, and impossibly, stubbornly in love. The call came at 2:17 a.m., and Jimin knew it wasn't going to be good before he even answered. Jungkook was half asleep beside him, one arm thrown across Jimin's waist, breath slow and warm against his shoulder. The room was dark, except for the thin blue light of the phone screen illuminating Jimin's face. It was their CEO. Jimin slipped out of bed carefully, untangling himself from Jungkook's arm. He stepped into the living room before answering. Yes, sir. There was no greeting on the other end. We have a problem. Jimin's stomach dropped. What happened? A sponsor pulled out, not a small one. They're citing brand misalignment. Others are reviewing contracts. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. He had expected backlash. He had braced for hate comments, divided opinions, heated debates. But this was tangible. This was structural. "We'll fix it," Jimin said quietly. "Fix it how?" The CEO's voice sharpened. "You went live. You doubled down. You made this official without namming it. Do you understand the financial implications?" Jimin swallowed. Yes. There was a pause. There's pressure from the board. Pressure, such a mild word for something that felt like a tightening noose. "What kind of pressure?" Jimin asked carefully. "To distance you two publicly, separate schedules, limit joint appearances, control the narrative before it controls us." The words hit like ice water. "You want us to act like we're not close anymore. I want stability. And if we refuse?" Another pause, longer this time. "Then we'll have to reevaluate future plans." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. After the call ended, Jimin stood motionless in the dark for a long moment. "Who was that?" Jungkook's voice came from behind him, low and groggy but alert. Jimin turned slowly. Jungkook was standing in the doorway now, shirt hanging loosely from his shoulders, eyes searching Jimin's face. "It's starting," Jimin said. Jungkook didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. "They want to separate us," Jimin continued. "Publicly, different schedules, fewer shared projects." Jungkook's expression hardened instantly. "No. It's not that simple." "It is to me." Jimin ran a hand through his hair. "We knew there would be consequences." "I didn't agree to be managed like a scandal," Jungkook shot back. "I'm not some PR problem to be contained." "You think I don't know that?" Jimin snapped. "I'm the one who got the call." "Then what are you saying? That we just accept it?" "I'm saying we need to think." Jungkook stepped closer, frustration radiating off him. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Calculating, compromising before the fight even starts." Jimin's temper flared. "And you're charging into a wall without checking if it's made of concrete." "At least I'm not stepping back." "Sometimes stepping back is strategic. And sometimes it's fear." The word landed heavy between them. Jimin's jaw tightened. "You think I'm afraid?" "Yes," Jungkook said bluntly. "I think you're terrified of losing everything." "I am," Jimin exploded. "I'm terrified of losing our careers, our team, the people who rely on us. I'm terrified of being the reason it all collapses." Jungkook stared at him, breathing hard. "And what about losing me?" The question cut through the anger like a blade. Jimin's voice dropped. "That's the one thing I'm more scared of." Silence swallowed the room. Jungkook's shoulders slumped slightly. "Then why does it feel like you're always preparing to let go?" "Because I don't know how to protect both at the same time," Jimin whispered. The raw honesty drained some of the heat from the air. Jungkook stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Maybe we stop trying to protect everything." "What does that mean?" "It means maybe some things have to break." Jimin shook his head. "You don't mean that." "I do." Jungkook's eyes burned. "If the system can't handle us being honest, maybe the system needs to change." "That's easy to say when you're not the one fielding threats from investors." "And you think I'm not hearing things too?" Jungkook's voice rose again. "I had a brand manager call me yesterday and suggest I rethink my public image. Like loving you is a branding error." Jimin blinked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you already carry too much." The confession hit harder than any accusation. Before Jimin could respond, his phone buzzed again, a message this time from an unknown number. He hesitated before opening it. It was a photo. Not the stairwell one, a new one, grainy, taken through what looked like a window. Jimin sitting on the couch earlier that night, Jungkook's head in his lap, Jimin's fingers in his hair. Intimate, private. Jimin's blood ran cold. What? Jungkook asked immediately. Jimin turned the screen toward him. For a second, Jungkook didn't react, then his face drained of color. That's inside. Yes. How? I don't know. Another message followed. We know where you live. Jungkook's hand trembled slightly as he took the phone. Rage replaced shock in his eyes. They crossed a line. They've been crossing lines for weeks, Jimin whispered. No, Jungkook's voice was deadly calm now. This is different. Jimin felt it too, the shift from public controversy to personal invasion. This wasn't commentary, this was intrusion. We call security, Jungkook said immediately. We will. And the company. They already want to separate us, Jimin said bitterly. This will just give them more reason. You think I care about their reasons right now? Jungkook shot back. Someone is watching us. That realization settled heavy in the room. Jimin moved to the window slowly and pulled the curtain aside just enough to glance outside. The street looked normal, quiet, almost too quiet. His reflection stared back at him, pale and tense. Jungkook came up behind him, not touching, just close enough to feel solid. We're not staying here tonight. Where are we going? Somewhere secure. Jimin almost laughed at the irony. Secure no longer felt like a real concept. They packed quickly, adrenaline sharpening every movement. As they left the dorm under the escort of emergency security, Jimin couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In the car, silence stretched thick between them. I won't let this scare us into hiding, Jungkook said suddenly. Jimin turned to him. It already has. No, relocating for safety isn't hiding. Pretending we're nothing to each other would be. Jimin leaned his head back against the seat. What if they escalate? Then we escalate our protection. That's not what I meant. Jungkook looked at him steadily. You're asking if this is worth the risk. I'm asking if we're being reckless with our lives. Jungkook's answer came without hesitation. Loving you isn't reckless. That's not what I asked. It's my answer. Frustration flared again. You don't get to simplify this into romance. And you don't get to reduce it to damage control. Their eyes locked in the dim car light, anger and fear tangling together. Do you regret going live? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. No, do you? Jimin hesitated. The hesitation was enough. Jungkook looked away first, jaw tightening. I don't regret us, Jimin said quickly. I regret that this is hurting people. People who never had a right to dictate us, Jungkook replied. But they feel like they did. That's not our fault. Jimin didn't answer. They arrived at a secured company property outside the city. High gates, cameras, guards. As the car pulled inside, Jimin felt the weight of what they had stepped into. This wasn't just controversy anymore. It was a battle between autonomy and expectation, between privacy and exposure. Inside the new space, sterile and unfamiliar, Jungkook finally exhaled. We'll figure it out, he said. Jimin looked at him, exhaustion seeping into his bones. What if figuring it out means choosing? Choosing what? Us or everything else? Jungkook stepped closer until there was no space left between them. His voice dropped to a whisper, intense and unwavering. I already chose. The certainty both comforted and terrified Jimin. Even if it costs you, Jimin pressed. Jungkook's eyes didn't waver, especially then. Jimin felt tears sting unexpectedly, not from weakness, but from the sheer magnitude of what they were standing against. Outside the gated walls, the world was still arguing, investors were still calculating, strangers were still speculating, and somewhere out there, someone had crossed from obsession into threat. Inside, in the quiet of an unfamiliar room, Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand and held it tightly. Not too tight. Just enough to promise that whatever storm was building next, they would not face it apart. The security alarm went off at 3:42 a.m. It wasn't loud at first, just a sharp mechanical chirp that sliced through the fragile quiet of the safe house. Jimin's eyes snapped open instantly. For a second, he didn't know where he was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the sterile walls, the heavy curtains drawn tight. Then the second alarm blared, longer, louder. Jungkook was already sitting up beside him. That's not a drill. Footsteps thundered down the hallway outside their room. A voice shouted something urgent into a radio. Jimin's heart began pounding so violently it made his hands shake. They said this place was secure. Jungkook swung his legs off the bed and moved toward the door. "Don't," Jimin hissed, grabbing his arm. "Let security handle it. And just sit here." "Yes." Another alarm shrieked, then silence. The sudden absence of sound was worse. A knock came at the door, 3 sharp raps. Both of them froze. "Open up," a male voice called. Jimin's blood ran cold. That wasn't one of the guards' voices. Jungkook moved in front of him instinctively. "Who is it?" he demanded. No answer. Just another knock, slower this time. Jimin felt something inside him shift from fear to something colder. "Calculated, dangerous. Don't open it," he whispered. The door handle rattled. Jungkook's jaw clenched. He looked like he might actually charge it. "Don't be stupid," Jimin said, grabbing him harder now. "You don't know who that is." Before Jungkook could respond, heavy boots pounded down the hall and a security officer shouted, "Step away from the door." A scuffle, a crash, a grunt of pain. Jimin couldn't breathe. After what felt like an eternity but couldn't have been more than seconds, someone knocked again. This time firm, authoritative. "Security, it's handled." Jungkook didn't relax immediately. "Name?" "Kim, 3rd rotation team." Jungkook exchanged a glance with Jimin that matched. He opened the door, a crack. In the hallway, 2 guards were restraining a man against the wall. He looked young, disheveled, eyes wild. "It's them," the man kept muttering. They lied to us." Jimin's stomach twisted. The man's gaze suddenly locked onto him through the gap in the door. "You said you were scared," he shouted hoarsely. "You think we're not scared too?" Security tightened their grip and dragged him away as he struggled. The door shut. Silence returned. But nothing felt secure anymore. Jungkook leaned his forehead against the door for a moment, breathing hard. He got past the outer gate. "Yes," Jimin whispered. That realization settled like a stone in his chest. They didn't go back to sleep. An hour later, the CEO was on video call, face pale and furious. "This is escalating beyond fan reaction. This is obsession." "You think," Jungkook snapped. "Watch your tone." "No," Jungkook shot back. "You watch yours. We were promised safety. We didn't anticipate someone breaking through 2 security layers." "Because you didn't want to," Jungkook said coldly. Jimin stepped in before it spiraled. "What are the next steps?" The CEO's eyes shifted to him. "We increase protection, restrict your movements further, suspend public appearances temporarily." Jungkook laughed in disbelief. "So we disappear?" "For now, yes." "That makes it worse," Jungkook argued. "It feeds the idea that we did something wrong. It prioritizes your lives." The word "lives" hung heavy in the air. Jimin folded his arms. "And what about the narrative? If we vanish now, the rumors will multiply." "Better rumors than funerals," the CEO said bluntly. The brutality of that statement silenced the room. After the call ended, Jungkook paced the length of the room like a storm contained in human form. "I refuse to live like prey," he muttered. "This isn't about pride," Jimin said quietly. "It's about dignity. It's about survival." Jungkook stopped packing and looked at him. Do you regret it now? Jimin didn't answer immediately. The image of the man in the hallway flashed in his mind. The fury, the betrayal. I regret that someone thinks they own us, Jimin said carefully. That's not what I asked. Jimin's voice dropped. I regret that loving me puts you in danger. Jungkook crossed the room in 3 strides. Don't twist this into martyrdom. I'm not. Yes, you are. Jungkook's eyes burned. You keep positioning yourself as the risk factor. Because statistically, I am. Stop it, Jungkook's voice cracked. You are not a virus in my life. The words stunned Jimin into silence. Jungkook's chest rose and fell rapidly. You're not something that infects my career. You're not the cause of this madness. The cause is entitlement, obsession, a system that tells people they can own parts of us. Jimin's composure faltered. And what if the system wins? Then we build something outside it. That's not realistic. Why not? Jungkook demanded. Why is it always you who believes we're smaller than the machine? Because I've seen what the machine does, Jimin shot back. I've watched artists disappear. And you think hiding will save us? I think being reckless won't. They stood inches apart now, anger and fear bleeding into each other. You think I'm reckless, Jungkook said quietly. I think you're willing to burn bridges faster than I can count the cost. And you're willing to drown slowly if it means keeping everyone comfortable. The accusation hit deep. Jimin's voice trembled despite his effort to steady it. I spent my entire life trying not to disappoint people. And I spent mine trying to be enough, Jungkook replied. I'm done living for approval. The vulnerability beneath the anger cracked, something open. Jimin stepped back first. I don't know how to do this without breaking something. Maybe something needs to break, Jungkook said again, softer now. Before Jimin could respond, his phone buzzed with a notification. A trending article. He opened it slowly. Leaked internal emails. Company discussions about restructuring the group dynamic. Consideration of placing Jungkook on a solo hiatus to minimize contamination risk. Jimin felt the room tilt. They're thinking about separating us permanently, he said hollowly. Jungkook took the phone and read. For a moment, there was no reaction. Then he laughed. It wasn't amused, it wasn't hysterical, it was something far more dangerous. They think they can cut you out like a tumor, Jungkook said quietly. Don't. That's what this is, Jungkook continued, eyes dark. Damage control. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. If they offer you a solo path without this mess, you should consider it. The words tasted like acid. Jungkook looked at him as if he'd been slapped. Say that again. You worked too hard to let this destroy you. And you think walking away from you would. It might save your career. My career is not more important than you. You don't know that yet, Jimin whispered. The hurt that flashed across Jungkook's face was immediate and devastating. You still don't believe I'd choose you. I believe you want to, Jimin said, voice breaking. I'm not sure you'll thank yourself for it 10 years from now. Jungkook stepped closer, lowering his voice to something dangerously steady. In 10 years, if I look back and realize I left the person I loved because of pressure, that's the regret that would destroy me. The honesty of it hit like a physical force. You don't get to sacrifice yourself on my behalf, Jungkook continued. That's my decision. And if I decide, I don't want you to carry that weight. You don't control that either. Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. Outside, security presence increased. Calls flooded in. The company scrambled to contain leaks and narratives. Inside the safe house, it felt like the real battle was here. Jimin finally spoke, voice low and raw. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize loving me cost you too much. Jungkook's expression softened in a way that undid him. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and decide I deserve better than the chaos we created. The truth was ugly and intimate. They were both afraid of being the other's ruin. A knock interrupted them. This time, it was one of the senior security officers. "We caught the intruder," he said. He had more photos, detailed ones he'd been monitoring for weeks. Jimin's stomach dropped. Monitoring how? Long-range lens, possibly a drone. The violation felt suffocating. "We are coordinating with law enforcement," the officer continued. "But you need to understand, this level of fixation doesn't disappear overnight." After he left, the room felt smaller. Jungkook looked at Jimin, eyes fierce despite the exhaustion etched into his features. "We don't retreat." Jimin studied him carefully. "We don't self-destruct either." "Then what?" Jimin exhaled slowly. "We take control." Jungkook frowned slightly. "How?" "We stop reacting, we make the next move." "What kind of moves?" Jimin's gaze sharpened in a way Jungkook recognized. Strategic, intentional, dangerous in its own right. "If they're already threatening to restructure us," Jimin said quietly, "then maybe we renegotiate the entire structure." Jungkook blinked. "You mean?" "I mean we stop playing defense." The idea hung between them, bold and volatile. Outside the safe house, the world was waiting for them to fracture. Inside, something else was forming. Not surrender, not retreat, but a counterattack. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and quiet hostility. Jimin felt it the second he stepped inside. 12 executives sat along the long table, screens glowing in front of them, financial projections already displayed, as if love could be reduced to percentages and damage reports. Jungkook walked half a step behind him, not submissive, not aggressive, just present, unyielding. The CEO gestured for them to sit. "We are here to discuss restructuring," he began. "No," Jungkook replied calmly, before even taking his seat. "We are here to discuss control." A ripple moved through the room. Jimin didn't flinch. He had expected this tension. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind all night while Jungkook slept restlessly beside him. "You've both seen the numbers," one board member said coolly. "Sponsors are withdrawing. Stock dipped 3% in 48 hours. International partners are reconsidering campaigns." "And streams?" Jimin asked quietly. The man hesitated. Jungkook leaned forward slightly. "Answer him." "They're up," another executive admitted reluctantly. "Significantly." "How significantly?" Jungkook pressed. 22% across major platforms. Social engagement is unprecedented. "Unprecedented good or unprecedented chaotic?" Jungkook asked. "Both." Jimin exchanged a brief look with Jungkook. That was enough. "You framed this as damage," Jimin said evenly, "but what you're actually facing is disruption." The CEO's eyes narrowed. "Semantics won't stabilize contracts." "No," Jimin agreed, "but strategy might." A low murmur moved around the table. One board member folded his hands. "You're in no position to demand strategy, you are the variable." Jungkook's jaw tightened, but Jimin spoke first. "We are the asset," Jimin corrected. "Silence." "We built the brand you're trying to protect," Jungkook added, "not the other way around." "And that brand depends on public favor," another executive shot back. "It depends on authenticity," Jungkook replied. "You're just uncomfortable with what that authenticity looks like." The temperature in the room shifted. The CEO leaned back slowly. "Let be direct. The proposal is to focus on Jungkook's solo career for the next 18 months. International markets are responding to him favorably. Jimin's public presence would be minimized to reduce volatility." There it was. Clean, clinical, brutal. Jimin felt his pulse thud in his ears, but kept his expression unreadable. Jungkook didn't bother hiding his reaction. "So that's it. You isolate him like he's radioactive. It's risk management. It's erasure, Jungkook snapped. Control your tone, someone warned. You don't get to tell me to control anything when you're trying to cut him out, Jungkook shot back. Jimin placed a hand lightly on Jungkook's arm, not to silence him, to steady him. You think separating us will calm the backlash, Jimin said, voice deceptively soft. It won't. And you know that how? A board member challenged. Because this isn't about proximity, Jimin replied. It's about the idea of us. He let the words hang deliberately. You remove me, you validate the narrative that something was wrong, he continued. You feed the outrage instead of diffusing it. Another executive scoffed, or we redirect attention. Jungkook laughed under his breath. You think the world won't notice if he disappears? We control media cycles, the CEO said sharply. No, Jungkook replied. You control headlines, you don't control people. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Jimin leaned forward slightly. Here's our counter-proposal. Several heads lifted. We renegotiate contract terms, he continued. Creative control, public messaging autonomy, shared profit distribution based on performance metrics, not image compliance. One of the older board members stared at him. You're not in a position to demand that. Jimin met his gaze without blinking. You're not in a position to lose us. The audacity of it landed like a bomb. Careful, the CEO warned quietly. Jungkook spoke next, voice calm but razor-edged. Our contracts are up for renewal in 8 months. You can try to sideline him, you can try to isolate me, but if you fracture us publicly, you fracture the fanbase permanently. You're threatening to leave, someone asked. I'm stating reality, Jungkook replied. Jimin didn't look at him, but he felt the weight of those words. They hadn't explicitly discussed walking away. Now it was in the room. We've given this company everything, Jungkook continued. Years, health, privacy, blood. And when we decide to be honest, your first instinct is to cut him loose. It's business, a board member said flatly. It's cowardice, Jungkook shot back. The CEO's patience thinned visibly. Enough. The word cracked through the room. You think passion replaces stability, the CEO continued. You think fans chanting online equals long-term sustainability. You are emotional, we are strategic. Jimin's expression shifted slightly, colder now. Then let's talk strategy, he said. He reached into his bag and slid a folder across the table. I had our team analyze engagement patterns, Jimin continued. Supportive demographics are younger, yes, but global. Growth markets in North America and parts of Europe have spiked. LGBTQ+ communities are mobilizing in unprecedented ways. Murmurs again. This is not just controversy, Jimin said steadily. It's cultural momentum. You want to brand yourselves as activists now, someone scoffed. No, Jungkook said sharply, we want to exist. A tense pause. And if we don't agree, the CEO asked quietly. Jimin finally looked directly at him. Then you'll spend the next 8 months trying to suppress something that will only get louder. Jungkook added, and when our contracts end, we'll take that momentum somewhere else. There it was. Not an ultimatum screamed in anger. A measured declaration. The boardroom fell into stunned silence. You would risk everything, one executive asked incredulously. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Yes. Jimin felt the tremor in his own chest, but kept his voice steady. We're not asking for chaos, we're asking for evolution. The CEO studied them both carefully. You're gambling, he said. So are you, Jimin replied. The meeting ended without resolution. Outside the building, reporters had gathered again, cameras flashing the second they stepped out. Questions were shouted over one another. Are you being separated? Is it true sponsors are leaving? Are you considering leaving the company? Security formed a tight barrier around them, but Jungkook stopped just long enough to face the cameras. "We're not being separated," he said clearly. Jimin felt the statement ripple through the crowd instantly. "We stand together," Jungkook added. Jimin stepped beside him, and were not afraid of conversations. They didn't answer anything else. Inside the car, the adrenaline hit hard. "That was reckless," Jimin muttered. "You told me we stopped playing defense," Jungkook replied. A small, unwilling smile tugged at Jimin's lips. "I did." Then his phone buzzed. Another notification. He opened it slowly. A new leak. Audio this time. A recorded snippet from the boardroom meeting. One of the executives' voices, distorted but recognizable. "Minimize contamination risk." The phrase echoed through the speaker. Jungkook went still. "They recorded it," Jimin whispered. "Or someone inside leaked it," Jungkook said. Within minutes, the clip exploded online. Contamination risk. The narrative shifted violently. Fans who had been uncertain turned furious, not at Jimin, not at Jungkook. At the company. The hashtag trended globally within an hour. By the time they reached the safe house again, the CEO was calling repeatedly. Jungkook looked at the screen, then at Jimin. "Answer." Jimin considered for a moment, then he shook his head. "Let them feel pressure," he said quietly. For the first time since this began, the power dynamic didn't feel entirely one-sided. But power was volatile. And someone had just proven they were willing to leak internal recordings. Inside the company. Inside the system. Jungkook stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You realize what this means?" "Yes," Jimin said softly. "We're not just fighting fans or sponsors anymore. No. They were fighting a structure that was cracking from within. And cracks, once visible, never truly disappear." The protest began at noon. By sunset, it had become a movement. Jimin watched it unfold on the massive screen in the safe house living room, arms folded tightly across his chest. Thousands of fans had gathered outside the company headquarters, not with hate banners this time, with candles, with printed screenshots of the leaked phrase, with signs that read "We are not contamination." Jungkook stood beside him, silent for once. "They turned it," Jungkook murmured. "No," Jimin corrected quietly, "the company turned it." The leaked audio had detonated something deeper than scandal. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about dignity, about how artists were treated behind glass doors and polished statements. Another notification buzzed. "Emergency board meeting. Immediate attendance required." Jungkook laughed under his breath. "Now they want us." "They always wanted us," Jimin replied, "just not like this." An hour later, they walked into the same boardroom. The atmosphere had shifted drastically. The executives no longer looked composed. They looked cornered. The CEO didn't waste time. "We have a crisis." "You've had one," Jungkook replied coolly. "You just didn't think it was yours." A board member slammed a tablet onto the table. "This leak is internal sabotage." "And," Jimin asked evenly, "and we will find who did it." "That's not the only problem," Jungkook said. The CEO exhaled sharply. "Public perception is turning against the company." "Public perception was already fractured," Jimin said. "Now it's informed." The word strung. "You think this helps you?" one executive demanded. "If the company collapses, so do you." Jungkook leaned forward slowly. "We're not the ones who used the word contamination." "Silence." The CEO's voice lowered. "We are prepared to revisit your proposal." Jimin didn't move. "Define revisit." "Creative control clauses, joint appearances, public messaging autonomy." "And," Jungkook pressed. The CEO hesitated. "Profit share adjustments." Jimin's pulse ticked up slightly. Specifics. An increased percentage on digital revenues tied directly to your individual and joint projects. Jungkook didn't look impressed. That's reactive. It's negotiation, the CEO snapped. No, Jungkook replied. It's damage containment. The room tightened again. You're in no position to dictate terms, an executive barked. Jimin's eyes flashed. We're the reason there's a protest outside your building right now. The truth landed heavy. One board member leaned back, studying them carefully. What exactly do you want? It wasn't asked with hostility this time. It was asked with calculation. Jimin inhaled slowly. This was the moment. We want contractual protection from image-based separation, he said clearly. No forced hiatus based on public reaction to our personal lives. And full veto power over public statements issued about us, Jungkook added. A murmur spread across the table. That's unprecedented, someone said. So is this, Jungkook replied. The CEO's gaze sharpened. And if we refuse? Jimin met his eyes steadily. Then you continue bleeding public trust, and in 8 months we walk. The bluntness of it left no room for interpretation. The CEO looked between them. You're willing to dismantle the empire you helped build. Jungkook's voice dropped to something dangerously calm. We're willing to rebuild it differently. Silence stretched. Then the CEO's phone buzzed loudly on the table. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed. What? One board member demanded. The CEO didn't answer immediately. He turned the screen toward them. A new article. A whistleblower statement. An anonymous senior employee had just confirmed that internal discussions about image purification and brand cleansing had occurred long before the leak. The room went ice cold. Jimin felt the air leave his lungs. Brand cleansing. Jungkook's eyes darkened in a way that was almost frightening. The CEO stood abruptly. This is a coordinated attack. Or the truth surfacing, Jungkook said quietly. You think we're the enemy, the CEO snapped. We built you. You managed us, Jungkook corrected. We built ourselves. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly now. Outside, the protest grew louder. The chants were audible even through the thick glass. One board member looked shaken. If this continues, we face investigations. For what? Jimin asked softly. The man didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. The CEO ran a hand through his hair, something Jimin had never seen him do. We'll draft a revised contract. Publicly, Jungkook asked. Yes. And you'll issue a statement addressing the language used internally, Jimin added. The CEO hesitated. You owe them that, Jimin continued, voice steady but charged, and you owe us. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the CEO nodded once. Fine. The meeting ended without the usual formality. As they stepped outside the building, the sound hit them like a wave. Thousands of people, not screaming in anger, chanting in solidarity. Jungkook stopped walking. Jimin felt it immediately. Don't. They deserve to see us, Jungkook said. They're not here for a performance. I know. Before security could protest, Jungkook stepped toward the edge of the barricade. Jimin followed. The crowd erupted when they became visible. Jungkook didn't grab a microphone. He didn't shout. He simply bowed. Deep. Jimin followed. When they stood upright again, Jungkook's voice carried without amplification. We never wanted war, he said. We wanted honesty. The crowd quieted almost instantly. Jimin stepped closer. We know some of you felt confused, some hurt, some angry. That's valid, but no one should be called contamination for loving honestly. The word echoed through the crowd. like a wound being acknowledged. We're not perfect, Jungkook continued. We are scared sometimes, we argue, we doubt, but we're not something that needs cleansing. A wave of cheers rose. Jimin felt his throat tighten, and neither are you. The moment felt electric, dangerous, transformative. Security eventually guided them back toward the car. Inside, Jungkook's hands were shaking slightly. That was reckless, Jimin murmured automatically. Jungkook laughed softly. You love saying that. Because it's usually true. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't hostile. It was charged with something else. Victory, maybe. Or the illusion of it. Jimin's phone buzzed again. He frowned as he read the notification. What? Jungkook asked. Jimin turned the screen toward him. Breaking, government regulatory body announces review into entertainment labor practices following internal leak scandal. Jungkook blinked. That escalated. Yes, Jimin whispered. The company wasn't just facing backlash now. It was facing scrutiny. And scrutiny meant exposure. Jungkook leaned back slowly, processing. We didn't start this. No, Jimin agreed. But we're in the center of it. The weight of that realization settled between them. This wasn't just about contracts anymore. It wasn't even just about love. It was about power structures unraveling. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand and laced their fingers together deliberately. Still scared? He asked softly. Yes, Jimin admitted. Regret. Jimin looked at the protest fading in the distance, at the thousands of lights flickering like stars against the dark. Then he looked at Jungkook. No. But as the car disappeared into the city night, neither of them could ignore the truth pressing quietly at the edges of their victory. When systems crack, they don't collapse gracefully. They fight back. The retaliation came quietly. No dramatic press conference, no furious denials, no public attacks. Just silence. For 3 days, the company said nothing. The regulatory review announcement spread. The whistleblower statement gained traction. Investors panicked. Analysts speculated. Fans organized. The building that had once felt untouchable now looked fragile under the weight of scrutiny. Jimin felt the shift before it was official. The safe house was too quiet that morning. Jungkook was in the kitchen, barefoot, making coffee like the world was mid-collapse. It was such a normal, intimate sight that Jimin had to pause in the hallway and just watch him. You're staring, Jungkook said without turning around. I'm memorizing, Jimin replied. Jungkook glanced over his shoulder. That sounds ominous. Everything sounds ominous lately. Jungkook handed him a mug, their fingers brushed, warm, real. We knew it wouldn't be simple, Jungkook said. I didn't expect it to become structural reform, Jimin muttered. Jungkook smirked faintly. You wanted to stop playing defense. Before Jimin could respond, his phone vibrated. He didn't need to look to know who it was. He answered. The CEO's voice sounded different, not angry, not commanding, tired. We've reached a decision. Jimin walked toward the window slowly. Jungkook watched his face carefully. I'm listening, Jimin said. The board has approved your revised contract terms, creative autonomy clauses, public statement veto rights, protection from image-based separation. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. And he asked quietly. And the CEO continued, we're issuing a formal apology for the internal language used. The phrase contamination will be directly addressed. Jimin exhaled slowly. Jungkook stepped closer, searching his expression. Jimin held up a finger slightly, signaling him to wait. In addition, the CEO added, we are initiating an internal cultural audit, independent oversight. That part surprised him. Why? Jimin asked before he could stop himself. A pause. Because, the CEO said carefully, if we don't adapt, we won't survive. The honesty was unexpected. After the call ended, silence filled the room. Well, Jungkook demanded. Jimin looked at him. They agreed. Jungkook blinked, all of it. Yes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jungkook let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, almost like disbelief. He ran a hand through his hair and looked at Jimin as if seeing him for the first time again. You did that, Jungkook said quietly. We did, Jimin corrected. But Jungkook shook his head. You. Jimin stepped closer. You were ready to burn everything down. And you were ready to hold the blueprint. A small smile tugged at Jimin's lips. Someone has to. The public statement went out that afternoon. It was direct, transparent. The phrase contamination risk was acknowledged and condemned. The company committed to internal change. They reaffirmed support for artist autonomy. Reactions were explosive. Some critics called it performative damage control. Others called it historic. Fans flooded timelines with relief, anger, validation, pride. The regulatory review continued, but now it felt less like a threat and more like a reckoning long overdue. That night, for the first time in weeks, there were no emergency meetings. No frantic calls. No security alarms. Jimin and Jungkook returned to their dorm. It felt different walking inside. Not smaller. Not suffocating. Just theirs. Jungkook dropped onto the couch, staring up at the ceiling. So this is what winning feels like. Jimin leaned against the doorway. This isn't winning. No. It's surviving. Jungkook turned his head slightly. You always redefine the moment. And you always dramatize it. A faint smile passed between them. Silence settled, but it wasn't heavy anymore. Jungkook sat up slowly. Do you ever think about that night? Which one? The rooftop, the storm, when you said we couldn't go on like that. Jimin walked toward him and sat down, close enough that their knees touched. I was suffocating, Jimin admitted. And no. Jimin considered the question seriously. The world was still complicated, the industry still unpredictable, the future still uncertain. But the air in his lungs felt steady. Now I'm breathing, he said. Jungkook studied him carefully, even after all this. Especially after all this. Jungkook reached for his hand. Not desperately. Not like he was begging. Just steady. You know, Jungkook said softly, there was a moment in that boardroom when I thought you were going to let me go. Jimin's chest tightened. There was a moment in the car when I thought you'd resent me forever. Jungkook shook his head. I'd resent a world that made you doubt yourself before I'd ever resent you. Jimin swallowed. I was never afraid of loving you, Jungkook continued. I was afraid of losing you to your fear. Jimin let out a slow breath, and I was afraid of losing you to your courage. They sat with that truth. Two different instincts. Two different survival strategies. One shared choice. Outside, the city lights flickered against the dark sky. The protests had quieted. The headlines had shifted. The system had bent, even if only slightly. The world hadn't ended. It had adjusted. Jimin leaned his head lightly against Jungkook's shoulder. We changed something. Jungkook intertwined their fingers. We changed ourselves first. No grand declarations followed. No dramatic promises about forever. Just quiet understanding. They would still argue, still doubt, still clash between caution and fire. But they would not suffocate again. Months later, when they stepped onto a stage under bright lights, the applause sounded different. Not louder. Deeper. Not ownership. Not entitlement. Support. Jimin glanced at Jungkook mid-performance, just for a second. Jungkook caught the look and smiled faintly. Not too tight. Just enough. And when the music swelled and the crowd moved like a living ocean before them, there was no storm above their heads. Only open sky. They had chosen each other. And this time, they didn't have to beg.